I'm Greg Brown for Newsmax TV Money. We're on the line with Richard Bove, a veteran bank stock analyst at Ladenburg Thalmann and Company. Bove was one of the first bank analysts to warn of the housing crisis, and he now views the stocks of the biggest banks as bargains. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Bank stocks a bargain, so is the worst really behind us?
I think it is. I think that, we're still going to see a big increase in loan losses in certain areas, such as home equity loans, auto loans, and probably credit card loans. But if you take a look at the structure of the banking industry right now, what you'll see is that there's more equity in the banks than there has been for the last couple of years. Their deposits are rising, their reserves are higher, and actually their loan volume is growing. So that if you have a company which has more equity, more reserves, more deposits, stable margins, and rising loans, you would argue that they're in pretty good shape. It's just that you have this terrible loan loss problem that has to kind of, like, as the old cliches say, the pig go through the snake. And when we're finished with the loan loss problem, I think that you'll see these big banks are in actually pretty good shape.
You've done some recent analysis of likely bank failures. Are many more banks at risk?
Well, I think if you take a look at the structure of the banking industry in the United States, you will see that there is probably a couple of hundred banks that are at risk that could fail. But I think you have to think about it this way. There are roughly 7,200 banks in the United States right now. The biggest 5 banks have 52% of the industry's assets, and the top, we'll say, 23 banks, which have more than $20 billion in assets apiece, have about 70% of the industry's assets. There are 6,000 banks at the bottom, and if you add up all their assets together, it doesn't equal what Citigroup has. So the likelihood is that you will see failures among those 6,000 banks, but it won't have an impact on the system.
You were criticized publicly for suggesting which banks might fail. Is it fair to say a bank might fail?
I think so. I think that basically what stockholders or depositors in banks want to know is how safe is their institution. And I don't think that there should be any prohibition on the part of analysts or news media or anyone else from speculating on where the risks are greatest in the system. Obviously, the banks don't feel the same way about that, but I think that the public does have a right to know.
How serious are the bank's problems with loans outside the housing industry? You mentioned earlier auto, credit cards, student loans. I've heard some pretty frightening numbers about the total risk.
Well, I mean, the problem really arises with the consumer. You know, if you take a look at the consumer's position, in the last couple of quarters, household wealth has gone down, and that's really pretty unusual in this country. Usually household wealth goes up every quarter. At the same point in time, you're seeing this big increase in unemployment, and beyond that, you've got this inflationary problem with healthcare, food, and fuel, which means that there's very little money left for discretionary purchases, or in the case of the financial industry, for making payments on loans which may have become outsized. So I think it's a big problem. I think there's no question about the fact that the consumer is under stress, and that you will see the loan categories that I mentioned, show more stress. But in addition to that, you may actually see companies which sell discretionary products, and I don't mean to highlight linens and things or Gap or whomever, but just as examples of companies like that could run into difficulty, and that will create more loan losses. On the other side, you have the fact that I think that the loan losses from mortgages will actually start to come down, and you will also see the amount being put into bank reserves come down. So you add it all up together, and it looks to me like it kind of evens out for the rest of the year.
What makes you think that investment banks, the big banks, as you mentioned earlier, are such a good value for investors now?
Well, I actually would separate the investment banks from the traditional banks. In other words, I really like big banks like Bank of America, Citigroup, J.P. Morgan, and regional banks like PNC Financial or BB&T or U.S. Bancorp. We are not recommending that anyone buy investment banks. We have sells on Merrill Lynch and on Goldman Sachs, and we have neutrals on both Lehman Brothers and Morgan Stanley. So those are 4 companies that I would not advise anybody buying.
In the end, do you think that the Fed and the Treasury has handled the financial crisis well or not?
Well, I think they're handling it as well as they can. I think that there's a lot of emphasis on the Fed and what the Fed does to the economy. I happen to be in the camp of thinking that the Fed has very little power and that the Fed doesn't have the ability to turn around the economy or set interest rates or drive money supply in one direction or the other. So I think there's a tremendous overemphasis on the Fed. I think Alan Greenspan and Ben Bernanke are brilliant men. I think they've done everything that they can think of to assist the American financial system or economy when they can. I think criticizing them doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense. I really believe that the Fed simply cannot do what it is that Congress, analysts, portfolio managers, the press, everybody thinks it can do. It just is limited in its power. So I don't think they're doing anything wrong. I think they're trying to assist the system, but I don't think they have enough power to solve the problems.
We've been speaking with veteran banking analyst Richard Bove from his office in Florida. Thank you, sir, for your time.
Thank you.
I'm Greg Brown for Newsmax TV Money.